Okay, the last and final part 4. This is pretty much going to be my last dark history because it drives up my anxiety, and I think I've pretty much covered all of it that I kind of want to at this point. I mean, at least as far as things that I think are important to be aware of that I haven't really seen a whole lot of discussion on before. It can be uncomfortable at times, but I think it's something to be aware of. And actually, this will kind of end on a positive note. If you need any of the history or background of what I'm going to discuss, feel free to go check out those previous videos. For this one, I'm mostly going to focus on how this is discussed today in regards to things like denialism. The Yugoslav Wars, one of those being the Bosnian War, have deeply affected this area. Prior to the wars occurring, I had read accounts where people discussed how it wasn't uncommon to have one or two couples on their street that were different faiths. For example, one couple might have one partner that is Bosnian Serb and the other one that is Croat Bosniak, whereas after the war, this seems to be pretty uncommon and there's varying responses from the youth. There are some that don't necessarily care about dating someone that is of a different faith or background. In some cases, their family might be accepting of it, but in some cases, they try to hide it, at least until they feel more secure about the relationship, because there's a good chance they could be disowned. Disowned was the word I was looking for. Slobodan Milosevic pretty much had control of the Serbian media at that point. Leading up and during the war, the Serb media pushed a lot of xenophobia and Serb nationalism. Part of the issue is that after the war, this was pushing denialism of certain events. In the previous videos, I pointed out how some sources would say massacre while others would actually say There's more than one reason for that. This just happens to be one of them. Another part of the issue is the way that this particular term is defined. You can feel free to pause and read that if you're interested. By 1951, these 5 items were kind of generally agreed upon to be the definition. More specifically, if any of the following acts are committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Unaliving members of the group, which is definitely something that happened and I touched on in the previous video. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, which I would argue applies as well. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. We're going to get back to those quote-unquote camps. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, such as, targeting one particular gender to be unalived or forcing births of another gender. I wouldn't say the 5th one applies here, but I will leave that up to your discretion. Another reason why using this specific term is discussed is because there are other terms that have proliferated for the destruction of particular types of grouping. It inherently carries a value judgment and it is widely considered to be the epitome of human evil. My personal opinion is when it starts getting to a point where people start being kind of pedantic about certain terms being used or how specific it is, I think we've lost the plot and we're also doing a disservice to the people that survived what happened, as well as those that didn't survive. One of the controversies is in regards to this cover from Time in 1992. In 2017, they revisited this cover, which is on the left. On the right is the same person in 2017. The man in the picture explained how his brothers helped him to survive. He also explains that more than 20 members of his extended family was unalived during the war. Feel free to pause and read that. Outside the camp, the images met with a different response. The horrific photographs and accounts inflamed public outrage. I never thought I'd see another in my life. And yes, I recognize that as a quote from former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The image ended up sparking controversy. In 1994, Foreign Policy magazine published an article by Peter Brock that years after it was published, attacked Time for the cover photo. He claimed that the picture showed a Serb, not a Muslim, suffering from tuberculosis. Brock claimed that the man was being held on looting charges. Time denied the claim, and Brock admitted that he had mistakenly challenged the issue, as Time explained in a note to readers. Time has thoroughly investigated the background of our cover photograph, and we confirm that the man pictured was, as we said, a Muslim prisoner of the Serbs. His name is Fikret Alek, and he is now a refugee in Copenhagen. Alek says Serbian soldiers arrested him on June 14, 1992, and held him along with several other prisoners until September of that year. The spring issue of Foreign Policy includes Time's rebuttal of Brock's charges, as well as a correction from Brock admitting it was not Time's cover he was challenging, but a different photograph that ran inside Newsweek's August 17, 1992 issue. Remember this for later. Later in an article from El País in January 1992, they revisited this image. In February 2021, Serbia's Happy TV channel was talking to the director of the controversial film Dara of Jasenovac. Feel free to look up the issues with this one on your own. I do not have time to get into it. The director talked about Alec being described as the skinny one with tuberculosis, the camp where he was held and mentioned as a place where one could enter and leave freely. Then they fed Alec, took the skinny guy away, and showed him in a circus around Europe. That's their propaganda, the TV host said. Their conversation would not be considered out of place in a country that has difficulty coming to terms with its role in the wars of the former Yugoslavia. The top Bosnian Serb leader, Dodik, I think, one of Bosnia's 3 rotating presidents, considers what happened at Srebrenica to be the greatest myth of the 20th century. Although this is not an isolated episode, something snapped inside Satko. I'm not even sure how to say that name. I thought, what else could they do to us now? First, for all the evil they did to us, and 25 years later, I have to hear on public television that the place where I was detained was not a camp. It wasn't like it was anonymous people denying what happened in comments around the internet. It was on state television, watched by hundreds of thousands of people. I felt enough was enough. Satko is a University of Amsterdam law graduate, and so he contacted Fikret Alek, the guy from the photo. The two agreed to lodge a complaint to Serbia's electronic media regulator REM, and together with the 3,200-member Association of Detainees of the Kazarak camp. In its response last May, REM acknowledged the personal offense to Alek but dismissed the complaint. Obviously, REM did not take this well, refusing to comment on the case, considering that any statement could be interpreted as pressure on the court and other participants in the proceedings. Alek now lives in Bosnia after a long stint in Copenhagen, and although he's part of the lawsuit, he sees it with more emotional distance. It is unfortunate to see that today some people make fun of our suffering and deny it, although personally I don't pay too much attention to it because I know what we lived through. This is not a matter of opinion, as our testimonies in the trials in British and Bosnia-Herzegovina courts confirmed. I think it would be good to punish the deniers in order to look ahead to the future, and that requires a clear picture of what happened and means facing the truth. I'm about to piss off an entire fandom, so before you type your entire paragraph, keep in mind information and testimonies from my prior videos. Keep in mind the issues with the definition. Also keep in mind that looking up to a particular academic or scholar doesn't mean you turn off your critical thinking skills. And lastly, intelligence in one area does not automatically mean intelligence in all areas. More specifically, this interview that he did, and if you're one of his super fans and you start being ridiculous in the comments, you're gone. That's why I did all this first. This is part of the transcript about 11 minutes in, I think, where the interviewer is asking him about why he doesn't want to use this particular term. Essentially, he thinks that the term is overused, though he does agree that Mustache Man definitely did this to certain groups. He points out the Jewish people and Roma were the primary victims, and that there were other cases where there have been mass unaliving. He brings up the example of East Timor, not sure to say that, in the 1970s. I will leave that at your discretion. Quote, in the case of Bosnia, where the populations unalived are far less, it was horrifying, but it was certainly far less than that. Whatever judgment one makes, even the more extreme judgments, I am just reluctant to use the term. I don't think it's an appropriate one, so I don't use it myself. But if people want to use it, it's fine. It's like most other terms of political discourse. It has whatever meaning you decide to give it. So the question is basically unanswerable. It depends on what your criteria are for calling something this. In the interview, Chomsky talks about how he thinks that these were refugee camps. People were free to come and go as they pleased, and they were bussing out women and children. He criticizes Western thinkers as not being independent as they brag to be, as if he is not part of that group. He apparently didn't get the memo that this photo was not staged and still thinks that it is, and then argues that it's against free speech to stop people from being able to criticize this. Like, what? I don't disagree with everything that Chomsky said. However, when it comes to this academic, elitist, overly semantic, almost kind of wanting to just be contrary, ew. I would also like to point out that Mustache Man's group also targeted Slavs and saw them as subhuman. You'll notice that number above me isn't 0. Darn it, I need one more video, but at least it will be more positive.